Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Frank and Younes, for the invite first. I'm very glad to be there. So today we will talk about the fourth industrial revolution. I suppose it's a familiar topic for most of you. We will talk about manufacturing. We will talk about a little bit about technology. I'm not an expert, so I will be challenged probably on that. We'll talk about skills. We'll talk about transformations, of course, and we will talk about Tesla, because I suppose most of you came for that topic, which is a very hot topic and a very interesting one, I would say. So the question on Tesla is, we will talk about Tesla way, but is really Tesla a company that we could mention as a model? Could we talk about a model for Tesla? What are the ingredients of this model? What can we learn from Tesla? So that are topics that we will discuss, but maybe before we start to dig into the topic itself, I would like to explain why I decided to study specifically Tesla. As François just said, I'm a consultant, so I help on a daily basis. I help executives in the manufacturing field to improve their performance, basically. So it goes from luxury to pharmaceuticals, chemistry, automotive, aeronauticals, etc. A lot of different sectors. And back in 2016, more and more executives were asking me the same question. That was, who or what model would be the next one for manufacturing? So probably most of you know the Toyota way, or Toyota, or lean manufacturing, which was a kind of inspiration for manufacturing during the last 20, 30 years. And so with the introduction of digital, the manufacturing environment needed a new model to be able and transform itself. So after this discussion with executives, I started to try and find companies that would be in advance in manufacturing. So I went here in Europe. I went to see companies like Mars in food industry, like Bosch in the automotive industry, like Kimberly-Clark, like GE, like Michelin, a tire manufacturer. So I saw a lot of different companies, but every time I found that these companies were very interesting for one topic. They were in advance in one or two topics, but there was nothing really disruptive in that company. So I was a little bit like frustrated not to have a kind of wow model. So I continued to investigate, and one of my colleagues told me, you should go to Shenzhen. So I saw in your lead tech program that there's one immersion in Hong Kong and one in Silicon Valley. And this guy told me, okay, Silicon Valley is very interesting, but if you want to see the next generation of startups, you should go to Shenzhen in China. So I've been there also. I've tried to find kind of inspirations here, and it's a quite amazing place. It's a very amazing ecosystem with a lot of agility in the way it works. But still not one company that was really leading the way. There are a lot of tech companies there, like Tencent, Alibaba, etc., but not really one manufacturing company that would be in advance. And then after a few discussions, one of my clients told me, you should stop trying to find a company that maybe is in manufacturing, but you should try and find companies that are just digital pure players. Maybe it would be a better inspiration. So I started to investigate a little bit on Google, Facebook, etc. But it's too far from manufacturing to really be translated easily. There was Amazon also, which is a kind of very interesting model, but more focused on logistics at the time. I think one day Amazon will make manufacturing probably, but not at that time. So I finally found Tesla, and what I found here was very interesting and very surprising. And maybe the first thing I saw, or the first thing that struck me at the time, was this stock market, which first is very high compared to other car manufacturers. So at the time I started to study it, Tesla was making around 7K cars per year. And the market cap of Tesla is much higher than the one of Renault or Peugeot, who produce 10 million cars per year. So it's quite surprising. So I started to wonder why. That's one of the questions. The other question was about this volatility, variability. And so I started to follow Elon Musk and just follow the news on what was happening in Tesla, etc. And I saw that every time Elon Musk tweets or talks, or which is every day basically, then the market cap is just going like this. So it's quite interesting, and also to an outside person like me, it's quite like a daily story. In fact, if you follow Tesla, every day something happens. And so I started to study the model, and I went, of course, in Fremont in California to interview employees, former employees, executives, etc. of Tesla, and I really saw that here there was something happening very, very interesting. And that's where I took the inspiration for the book that François mentioned, which also exists in English if some of you are not a French speaker, in a Kogan page. So well, that's it. So after this maybe a little bit long introduction, sorry about that, we can enter the topic, and we will start by talking about the fourth industrial revolution. During the presentation, we will make 3 breakouts to have a kind of discussion, because I think we create more value by discussing than by presenting slides. So we'll have good discussions, I'm sure. But before that, I will come back to what we call the fourth industrial revolution. So I don't know if for you it's clear what is for the one who it is very clear what is the fourth industrial revolution, could you raise your arm? Have you already heard about it? Yeah? Okay, not so many people then. So everybody has a different definition of it. To me, the fourth industrial revolution is basically the hybridization between the classical manufacturing industrial sector and the digital world. And it's just the impulsion of digital in manufacturing. So it's just basically the kind of hybridization of these two worlds, which you see here Henry Ford starting the 20th century, which is a classical manufacturing. It didn't change so much during the 20th century. So of course there has been some productivity improvements, etc., but nothing really disruptive in terms of technology, at least. And now I didn't know that you have the next conference is about women in tech. When I did the slide, I precise. But to me, it's the future of manufacturing is what we see on the right side, which is a woman, young, and a tech addict, which is very different from what we have today when you enter a factory. When you enter, I don't know if some of you are from the manufacturing field, but when you enter a factory, generally speaking, you see mostly men, about 50 years old, and very often they are walking. They are walking because there are waste and a lot of things that could be improved. You see also inventory, you also different type of things, but you, generally speaking, don't see women, young, techno-addict. That kind of people, you can see it in Tesla, you can see it in a few companies also here in Europe. And when you look at, the interesting is when you look at the companies that are more advanced, they are, generally speaking, also more connected to the startup world. So they are more like near big cities, like you see, I don't know if you saw, but Tesla decided to put its next gigafactory in Berlin. It could have decided to put it in like in the countryside. It put it near just the places where the startups are, which is kind of a sign of the evolution of manufacturing, which is a kind of new sector, hybrid between classical manufacturing and digital. So, if most of my clients, when we start talking about the fourth industrial revolution, the first thing that comes in mind is, of course, technology. So you have here a list of lots of technologies that can be useful in manufacturing, and all of these technologies can be useful, but of course it depends on the sector and the context of the companies. But on the left side, you see also this iceberg, because as François said before, and as it is often the case in big companies, the real stakes for the fourth industrial revolution are technological, but mostly they are also on other topics. And there are, to me, in the manufacturing sector, there are 4 major changes that are happening right now and that are changing completely the context. The first one is the collaborative economy. The collaborative economy for manufacturing, one of the consequences is that when you are a manufacturing company, you are used to make a product and then you just a little bit forget about it and the product is used by the client and it's a kind of end for you. In the new economy, this product is often connected and so it can offer services. And so as a manufacturer, as a manufacturing company, you need to think about your product as a way to provide services also to your clients, which is kind of really a shift in the way you design your product and you sell your products. The second change is hyper-concentration. I've started to talk about it a little bit when I was talking about cities, big cities. The figures that you have here come from a book that was written by Pierre Vels, which was the director of École des Ponts, by the way. And in that book, he explained that there are 10 hubs in the world, big hubs like Shenzhen, for instance, like San Francisco, etc. In that 10 hubs, you have 75% of R&D of the world, and you have 40% of the GDP, of the world GDP. What that means is that the value tends to be more concentrated in digital, like the winner takes it all, we say. So when a company takes an advantage, generally speaking, it's difficult to keep the pace for the other one. But also geographically, there is a concentration of the talents. And when you're an executive in a manufacturing company, a small company, for instance, in OPEO, we help groups, but we also help small companies that are usually in the countryside. It's very difficult to attract talents because the talents that you need to take advantage of the fourth industrial revolution are more in big cities. So how do you do when you have a small companies and you are in the middle of France or in the middle of Germany or far from a big city to attract these talents? It's quite a challenge. So the third challenge is about hyper-connection. So this one is easy. Of course, we have all a smartphone, so it's a big change in our daily lives to be connected, but it has also implications, especially in manufacturing and in factories. In factories right now, or in other environments, it's the same. Generally speaking, the people who are in the field, so the frontline people, they are connected, they have a smartphone, so they have access to a lot of data that they had not before. One of the consequences of that is that for a manager, the manager was before the one who was leading the information, conveying the information, and trying to give sense to the different data that were available in the field. Now, very often, people in the field have access to the data before management, and so there is a kind of shift in the way you should lead your team, and to be more like a position of coaching and trying to solve problems with them, rather than being really top-down in the way you lead your team in the field. And the last one is about the exponential progress. This exponential law might be easy to understand when you're a startupper, because we have a lot of examples of business now that are exponential. Amazon is a good one. Amazon lost money during a long time, a long period, and now when we saw it beginning to be profitable, it was a little bit too late because we were already on the side of the exponential, which is like a Dirac. So this, in the tech world, I think is something that we were used to deal with. In manufacturing, it's not natural at all, because manufacturing is a place where you transform material, where you transform products. So generally speaking, the physical laws are more linear. So understand an exponential model for a typical chief of operations or for a plant manager is very difficult and not natural. So it's a kind of change also in mindset to have in mind that in 2 years or 3 years, maybe your product will be completely different. Maybe there will be an actor coming from a different field from your field, and that will disrupt you because they have the opportunity to go this way. So all of these change are quite important and should be part of the DNA of manufacturing of the future. So part of this change are threats, but part of it are also opportunities. And here you have a kind of a list of all the opportunities associated with manufacturing. As you see, there are 2 types of opportunities. A kind of set of opportunities that are more disruptive, business-like. As I said before, for instance, you can imagine that you will sell services, even if before you were only selling products. So it's a kind of really big change in your business model. That's a kind of opportunity. But you have also more classical opportunities, like what you see on the bottom of the slide, operational efficiency. So you can automatize your processes, robotize it, make it less painful to simply manufacture your product, improve your level of quality, etc. So there are a lot of improvements, classical improvements that you can do with technology, which is the bottom side, and also disruptions that you can do, which is more the top side of the slide. And here you have a few figures. The one on the left, 10 to 20% is a figure coming from a study of BCG. So it's the percentage of the growth of the industrial GDP which will be linked to digital and new tech. So it's quite an important part of the growth which will be linked to tech. And on the right side, you have the percentage of investments that will be done to do new business models, 55%, or to improve basically the efficiency of your operations, 45%. But anyway, it's an important topic for executives. Nevertheless, when you read the different studies that are done every year on the topic, interviews of executives, every time you have this kind of percentage, there's about 1/3 of the executives that are worried that they could be disrupted in the coming years, and there's about three quarters that are worried about the speed of progress and worried about their own ability to change. So, to summarize, there are a lot of opportunities linked to digital and new tech, but the executives complain because it's too slow. So, that would be our first breakout, and in fact, all your answers can fit in one of this field, but probably the one that was more where you focus more was mindset, which is of course the most important one. But behind mindset, generally speaking, there are other things. When you don't have the right mindset, it's, as you said, a cultural problem usually, and behind the culture, usually you find a lack of sense, so you don't know why you should change, a lack of skills, you don't know how to change, a lack of tools, so you don't have the good tools to change, and a lack of also role model from the management. So mindset is a good, it would be a good synthesis of all these points. So it's everywhere in the 4 points. But apart from that, you were talking about finance. Finance is an issue, and you will find it as a sub-part of contradictions. In fact, in the new world, when you're an executive, or even if you're a field manager in manufacturing, there are a lot of contradictions, because every day when you read what you can read on the social media, in conferences, etc., you read that you should be agile. So you should be agile, you should make sprints, you should go, you should change very quickly, etc. So of course you should make Scrum, etc. That's very important. But at the same time, as you are in the physical world, because you have a plant to manage, you need to invest. And when you make an investment, usually speaking, you make an invest thinking long term, thinking middle term. So you need to have, like, as you said, a budget and to make it happen. It takes sometimes a few months or even a few years to have an investment complete. So how do you manage this contradiction between short time, being agile, and long term, have a vision of a long term view? Second type of contradiction is between having a good strategical view, and we will see after in Tesla that the strategy and the vision is very strong, to make sure that you converge and that everybody in the company is just basically going in the same direction. But at the same time, taking advantage of the energy of the teams to make what we call bottom-up test and learn. Test and learn is basically in the field, having people trying technologies, testing new software, testing new technologies in the field, etc. If you want people to make test and learn, you need to have a kind of bottom-up culture. But at the same time, if everybody does what they feel like doing, if you have a big group, for instance, I have a client right now, he has 70 factories all over the world. So this guy, he told me, okay, I've made a lot of test and learn in all my factories. The issue is that everybody does its way. And at the end, I have no results on my P&L because everybody is testing a new solution, but I don't capitalize on that. So how do you manage to solve this contradiction? The second point, and you mentioned it when you talked about HR. So HR is, of course, recruiting. So I talked about it a little bit when I was talking about the Gigafactory, where you should have your industrial footprint. So it's attract people, but how do you train people also? How do you have the right skills to make this transformation? Manufacturing is one of the sectors. For instance, here in France, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there's quite a lot of unemployment, about 10%. And manufacturing in France is one of the sectors that don't manage to recruit people. They don't manage to find people to do maintenance, to do like machining, etc. So yet, it's already difficult to have the right talents to do the 2.0 or 3.0. So how do you manage to do 4.0? Because the people who should do 4.0, they are in San Francisco, in Shenzhen, a little bit in Paris, a little bit in Berlin, but they are not in Bar-le-Duc or in a place completely lost in France. So it's quite difficult. The third aspect of difficulty is methodology. So methodology is what you said before when you said it's how do you lead a project and people understand what you do? How do you connect the different projects that you have in your company, strategical project, digital project? How do you organize to do that? How do you make local change, but also transversal change? For instance, if you need to improve the traceability of your product, you need to change all the functions of the company. How do you make a project like that? And at the same time, you improve just a workstation in the field. It's not that easy. It's not as easy, for instance, as in the industrial revolution before. For lean manufacturing, you could really improve the process doing step by step, factory by factory, workshop by workshop. Here you should think global, and at the same time you should think local, which is quite difficult. And the last issue is the lack of model. So I've already started to talk about it. So the question is, who is the new Toyota? And that would be one of the things that we will discuss after. It seems maybe not important, but it is, because to be able to change, we are all like that, we need to have a kind of projection of how it could look like, what could be a good target, what could be the principles that we would try to copy. And especially in the manufacturing, where it is a place with a lot of people. Generally speaking, a factory is between 100 or even until 1,000 or maybe 10,000 people. If you want to make all these people change at the same time, you should have a clear vision, you should have a model, you should have examples that you could just foster to make change happen. So we will talk a little bit about skills, and then we will talk about the new model. Skills. So we talked a little bit about it. You said maybe one of the issue is the fear of the robot, or the fear of basically not having unemployment anymore. This is a study that has been done by the World Economic Forum, and the interesting thing on it, there are different things, but one of it is that today, if you take all the working hours in the world, there are about 70% of the working hours that are done by men or women, and 30% that are done by machines. In 2025, you would have 50% done by men or women and 50% done by machine. So this shift, of course, will be important in manufacturing, because in manufacturing there are a lot of things that can be automated for physical tasks, but also for just basically information tasks. If you look at the skills that are important now in manufacturing, that will be more and more important in the future, there is also a very important shift. So for instance, today, of course, you need to have manual dexterity, and there are still factories with people using their hands a lot. I was this week I was in a factory with a lot of women just basically assembling products for sanitary. So there are still manual tasks, or even in luxury, for instance, there are a lot of tasks that are done manually. So it will last, but it will be less important in the future than your ability to learn creativity, critical thinking, leadership, or emotional intelligence, etc. One of my main learning when I was in Silicon Valley in San Francisco and in Fremont, I thought when I was there that that the important skills would be more coding, programming. I thought that really programming was the key to everything in a digital world. And I discovered that in fact the really very rare competencies was about design. So I saw in a lead text that you have design thinking is part of the program, and I'm really convinced that design thinking, which was already a kind of set of skills that is really used a lot to design product, this will be a skill that will be more and more important also inside the company to improve the workstations, because the user is not only the client, the user of the solutions is also the one inside the company. So basically, if you take a manager or just an operator in a factory, these people also need design to have tools that are just pleasant to use, that are comfortable, to have also just phones like this and not like phones like who look like in the 80s or something like this. When you look at the right side of the slide, this change of skills will have implications on the way factories work. First of it, of course, you will have less frequent change, more frequent change in tasks. So basically, everything that could be automated will be. And so in a way, work will be more interesting, which is a good thing also for ergonomy, because it's not very good to do always the same gesture. Man and machine will work together, so it seems very obvious, but it will be more and more the case. People will be more in anticipation, whereas in just doing the task. So there are more and more techniques in manufacturing to predict, for instance, maintenance, to plan better the production, etc. So prediction is getting more and more important. Decision making, autonomous decision making, is also something that is more and more important, and it's related to what I said at the start with data. The people who own the data are the people in the field, because they are connected to the outside world very often with subcontractors, with clients, etc. So you need to give them autonomy. But the question is just, where do you put the frontier between autonomy or top-down management? For instance, I was talking about Michelin before. In Michelin, they have tried to do something. They have tried to test in some teams a way of working where the team itself decided who they would engage. So when they needed a new employee, it was the team who decided and not the manager. So the team is about 15 people. The 15 people were together and they decided who they wanted to have as a colleague. They decided also what they wanted to purchase, etc. They've done that in 7 factories among the, I think, 100 factories of Michelin. And in fact, they have stopped the experiment because it led to very complicated discussion with support functions. Because when you do that, what is the role of the manager? The manager changes completely its role because it doesn't decide who is hired. What is the role of the HR? HR is not part of the process of recruitment anymore. So you have a lot of questions going on with support function. So it is one of other change that will happen is that support function like HR, quality, methods, etc. All that function will change a lot also with digitalization because it will change the processes basically, automate some of the processes and change the responsibility of other processes. Okay, so this was about skills. Now we will talk about the second topic that makes the change so slow, which is the lack of model. I don't know if you're familiar with this slide or this kind of description of industrial revolution. At the start of the presentation, I asked if you knew all what was the fourth industrial revolution. To me, an industrial revolution is always the combination of 3 changes. One of the changes is about the market and the society. One of the changes is of course, technology, how technology can help to fuel new needs in the society. But also, to make it happen, you need to have organization model that make it possible. So if you look at the 4 industrial revolution, the first one was fueled by the steam machine in terms of technology. And in terms of society, it was a time where we needed to build a lot of infrastructures. And to be able to do that, the organization that took place was mechanization, so the start of automation in a way. The second industrial revolution, the new technology was mainly electricity at the start of the 20th century. And the need for the market was mass consumption, especially in the US. So mass consumption was starting to be there. The system who made it possible was Fordism or Taylorism, sorry. So a system where you could just basically specialize the tasks, etc., and so improve the productivity of each machine. The third industrial revolution was boosted by the start of the computers. First computers, first robots, etc., in the 1970s. And the phenomenon in terms of society was globalization. So we had very big, it's the start of the very big supply chains with companies that were buying components everywhere in the world, etc. And the system, organization system that made it possible is Toyotism. So the basically lean manufacturing that made it possible to be very reactive, even if the supply chain were very complex, because of a lot of principles like just in time, etc., etc. And now we enter the fourth industrial revolution, where, as I said before, you have the collaborative economy and the need for a real change in terms of way of producing to respect the planet and the environment on the one side. And you have, in terms of technology, IoT, AI, and all these connections that we discussed before. So what is the model that will make it possible to take advantage of new technologies to respond to the society needs? And so my theory, as I said before, is that Tesla is one of the models that could inspire this change, at least in manufacturing and maybe in other sectors. We will discuss that together after. So as I said, I was there. I spent a few weeks on site, discussed with Tesla employees, but also SpaceX employees and SolarCity, because as you probably know, Elon Musk has different companies. So it was interesting to also have different views on what happened in the different companies. Is it the same culture, etc. Following that, time I spent on site, I saw that there are a few principles in that Tesla way that could be replicated to other companies. And then when I came back to Europe, I continued to investigate in European companies, and I saw that these dimensions are also true in part of the companies here. So this is a second breakout. The second breakout is what, according to you, makes Tesla so different. So we'll take 2 to 3 minutes to think about it. Maybe I will explain all the 7 dimensions for you to make it more clear for you. But you talked a lot about story making. What I've branded as story making is what you said. I don't remember your name. Jean-Philippe? No? Yeah. About stories. So we'll see after, but it's very important now when you have a company to have a business model, but have also a kind of vision where the company is not only with an objective which is economical, but also which is an objective for the planet and for the goods of the society. And it does that very well. And the other side of that, of story making, is also the kind of communication very direct that you were mentioning, that you can just tweet something to Elon Musk and he will just answer you, which is, I don't know so many companies, at least in manufacturing, doing like this. Generally speaking, CEOs of manufacturing company, even their employees, they see them once per year, they cannot talk to them. Whereas here you have somebody who is open to his clients, who is, as you said, constantly looking for information and improvements from the social media, which is an important thing. In story making, you have also the notion of doing, which is, that's why we have also added the word making, which is, he's an inspiring leader, but he's also doing a lot. In fact, when I was there, I was really amazed to see how he was involved in the field, in basic problems. Like when I was there, it was interesting because the production line didn't work, in fact. It was when the Model 3 was ramping up, and it didn't work because it was too much automatized. He tried to automatize a lot, and it didn't work at first. And in fact, he was there, and he was in the field helping the team. So it's being able to tell stories, but at the same time being very, very doing in a very detailed level in the field. Other things that you've mentioned is learning. So learning is how you build a product which is iterative. As you said, in fact, he has built a car that didn't exist, but it's also because of iterations that he made it possible. So it just basically, it's the principle of going very quickly, like it's classical in digital world. You sell a product very quickly and then you improve it because it's connected and you get feedback and you can improve it very quickly. So it's an important aspect, and behind this dimension, you have the notion of taking risks. And it's not natural in manufacturing to take risk because it's really an environment where you don't dare, you have processes, you should respect processes, etc., procedures. Here, the idea is you have to take risk, you have to innovate, to improve, and so you have to be bold, as you said, the sky is the limit, to test some things. So if you fail, it's just part of the process, but you have to learn. So the important is you have to learn every time, which is, to me is one of the most important dimensions. Then after that, you have other dimensions that I will detail after. Some of the dimensions are more, in a way, art dimension, like software. So how software is used, of course, in Tesla, even on the one side inside the car, but also outside the car to get the car connected, and how you make a network also. So tentacular traction is about how you create platforms. For instance, you said before, if hydrogen will be the energy of the future, how will he cope with that? One form of the answer is that he didn't expect from regulation to build networks. Here in France, we have a lot of discussion, for instance, to Renault, PSA, and all the car manufacturers. They are lobbying a lot, the government or the European Union, to build a network. In fact, in Tesla, you have a completely different mindset. He thought that a network should be done, and so just he built his own network to make it happen. So there's really this mindset of, okay, we need a network, I will build it. I will build my network. I don't expect from the government to do it for me. So there's a kind of entrepreneurial way of doing business that is not so classical in manufacturing so nowadays. The blue dimensions are more classical one. It's more like doing better what you do already in manufacturing. Hyper manufacturing is like a 2.0 version of the lean manufacturing, it means that you will track waste in the field every day, but you will track new types of waste. So we'll come back to that. Startup management or startup leadership is how, as you said, you are very horizontal in the way you communicate and you decide. One of the things that is striking in Tesla is the speed of decision. Decision is done very, very quickly. And one of the guys I interviewed in Fremont, he told me that usually decisions are taken within a day or even within an hour when it's something to be decided. And when you compare it to groups or to I see here people nodding, where we do that in classical groups because there are a lot of functions, very structured processes, etc. Sometimes it's weeks or even months to decide something. It's really disruptive. So we will enter now the 7 dimensions with examples that maybe will make it more clear. But as you see, there are 3 circles. The circle which is in pink is the most disruptive one because it's a circle linked to the business model, how you do the business, how you attract people, how you communicate to the outside world. The blue one is more inside the company, how you improve the company, your product, how you design your product, how you manufacture your product, how you lead your teams. And the one at the heart, of course, is linked to mindset and how you behave on a daily basis. So we'll start with the heart of it, with 3 examples of how Tesla does differently than other car manufacturer or other manufacturing company. As I said before, failure is an option, and it's part of the process. Fail is part of the process, which is probably some of you are in the tech sector. This fail fast attitude, etc., is very common. In manufacturing, it's not common at all. So first example is this car. I don't know if you know this car on the left side. It's the first car that was designed, that was produced by Tesla. In fact, it's not a Tesla, it's a Lotus. Lotus is an English, I think it's English at the start, I'm not sure. English company making sports cars. In fact, to start with, there was not a roadmap, a 4 years roadmap with all the products that would be done by Tesla. To start with, they have developed a battery, and then they have taken a car, an existing car, a Lotus, and then they have transformed it to put a battery inside it, and they have sell it. And so it took 3 to 4 months to build the first Tesla car, compared to a classical car manufacturing project, which is nowadays it's about 2.5 years to develop a new car. But 10 years ago, it was about 4 years to develop a new car. So really quick, a new product that was not perfect, but it made it possible to sell a few cars, to get money from rich billionaires in San Francisco and California, basically. And then iteratively build a new product, so Tesla Model S, and then Tesla Model X, and then Tesla Model 3. So a kind of way to fuel innovation by test and learn. The second example is the image that you have at the center. So when I was there, as I said, the production line was stopped. It didn't work at all because of robotization. That didn't work. So it was interesting. I was there to study performance, and it was just not working. But then, as I said before, fail fast is also learn. And I was amazed with the speed of learning of the system. So it didn't work to robotize, so they just get back. They just removed the robots, and they decided to build this line, which is under a tent. I don't know if you see, but it's under a tent in the parking of the factory. They did it in about 1 month. They built basically this tent, and they started to produce the Model 3 on that tent to make sure that even if robotization didn't work, then you would continue to learn and to produce your cars to be able and match your target. So this kind of very reactive way, operational way to produce car is also very exotic. Myself, I started my career in Peugeot. I was a maintenance manager. I can promise you that if somebody try to do that in Peugeot is fired in less than 1 hour because it's not just impossible to think like that. So it's a way of thinking that it's just impossible to have in a classical car manufacturing company. And the last image is something that you probably saw because it made a lot of buzz on the Cybertruck. So Cybertruck is a new car that was shown I think it was last week. You know, it's supposed to be a car like in Blade Runner, like very futurist, etc. And in fact, there was a show, and in that show, it was supposed to prove that the car was unbreakable. So they tried to throw balls in the car. So it worked quite well on the steel. The steel went perfect, but on the glass, it didn't work. In fact, the glasses just broke. And so, to me, when I saw that, I really laughed because it's so typical of Tesla that, in fact, they didn't. I think a car manufacturer would have tested it during months to make sure that everything was perfect and that it would happen perfectly. Here, when you see the comment after, they have tried it like behind the scene a few times. It worked. They took the same car. They've tried it on the scene. It didn't work because the glass started to be a little bit broken and they didn't see it. It couldn't be seen by eyes. But the more important is that when Elon Musk was interviewed on that, so all the journalists said it's a big fail, etc. He just said, okay, so it's something we have to improve until we launch the product. And to him, it was not a big issue. In fact, it's just business as usual. Okay, we have a problem. We'll improve it later. But it's very different from other companies. So next dimension is hyper-manufacturing. Hyper-manufacturing, I will maybe go quickly because it's probably not the dimension that is the most interesting for you. But it's just a kind of better way of doing lean manufacturing. You have these goals, hyper-customization, massification, agility, frugality, collaborative value, which are goals linked to a manufacturing sector in the 21st century. And to address these goals, you have a certain type of waste that you will track on a daily basis if you're a production manager. You know, in the lean, if you're familiar with lean manufacturing, there were 8 types of waste that has been codified. Like one of the waste is to have too much inventory. One of the waste is to redo something that you already done. One of the waste is to walk unnecessary walk or walking or moving, etc. Here, it's new types of waste who are linked to digital. For instance, a type of waste is bureaucracy. So you will try to remove, as you said, procedure, bureaucracy, etc., to decide very quickly, and so less and less democracy as possible. Another type of waste, for instance, is user discomfort. So user discomfort is of course, for clients. So if you enter a Tesla, the UX is very, I would say, important, and you see that everything has been studied to really understand how the brain of the user will work. But it's also the case inside the factory, in fact, how you make tools that are basically pleasant to use. If some of you, you work in manufacturing, so when I started in 2000, when you enter the factory, everybody was like working, most of people were not working with PCs, but people who were working with PCs, it was really very old PCs, you know, very not comfortable at all, and when you discussed with managers at the time, they said, we do that on purpose because we don't want people to play. So we have very bad tools, but it's very good because I'm sure that they won't do anything else than work. And nowadays, it's just impossible to have the same way of thinking, but a lot of factories are still working like this. So this shift needs to be done. So I won't elaborate on all the ways, but it's a new way of just leading a plant. Yeah. Frugality. Frugality is both how you make your plant work more efficiently on a daily basis, but at the same time also respect the planet. So trying to consume less material, trying to recycle as much as possible, trying to minimize the energy waste, lighting, water, waste, etc., which is more and more important, especially to attract young people, because young people don't want to work in an environment that doesn't respect the planet. Third dimension is software hybridization. The interesting with Tesla, which is really disruptive, as you said, compared to other car manufacturers, is that when you own a Tesla, it's it's got upgrades basically that are done like you have in your iPhone, so software upgrades, very frequently. And so your Tesla can improve over time, which is very different from a classical product where you buy the product and over time the value decreases. So the value of your car potentially can even increase, for instance, for autopilot, or at least it's what Elon Musk claims, is that with autopilot, if you improve the functionalities of autopilot, if you buy a Tesla with autopilot, you buy it, I don't know, 60,000 euro. In 2 years' time, if autopilot is really better, maybe your Tesla is worth more than what it's worth today. So it's really a way of thinking different. The other advantage is linked to what you said. When a client complained about something, when I was working in Peugeot, when a client has a problem, he had to go to what we call a concessionnaire, so a local guy. He talked about his complaint, and then there were statistics about how many complaints there was on that topic, etc. So it took a few months to go into in Poissy or in Paris, and then after it get to the plant about 1 year after, and after we decided action plan. So about two years after, or 1 year and a half after, we started to tackle the problem. Right now, with just Twitter and all the social medias, you can have a direct link with consumers and see what are the main pains of consumers, and to improve. As the car is connected, it can be improved, basically. So they can make an upgrade depending on the problem. Here you have an example of a hurricane that happened in the US. And Tesla decided to improve basically the range of the batteries of all the people that were near the place where the hurricane was supposed to go. So it's a complete change of designing product and then using it. Another dimension, it's startup leadership. So startup leadership is how people behave, so how managers behave basically on a daily basis. On the left side, you have the classical behaviors, which are, managers are trainers. They need to have a vision. This is still true, of course. But on top of that, you have other behaviors that are expected, like doer. As I said before, in that new world, you need to be a doer. And it might be something complicated to understand. As you said before, you have IT and ops. Usually speaking, those two functions have difficulties to talk to each other in companies. And the way to reconcile that is to have executives who are doer, in fact. So if a CEO or a COO doesn't understand at least a little bit what happens in the field in terms of what is coding, why is it important, why is it digital important, what it can lead, what is it in terms of level, then you won't have the value that you expect. So it cannot be something that is delegated. And then, of course, the manager is a challenger, is an accelerator. I've talked about it, so you should decide very quickly. And you should be able to coach your people, because as we said before, skills are changing so quickly that you need to adapt your skill set on a daily basis. Story making. So I was talking about Tesla being different in terms of vision. First of it, we are talking about it together. When you look at the mission of Tesla, it's not a mission of a car manufacturer. The mission of Tesla is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable transport. So this vision is very strong. And as I said before, it's not just a vision of an economical vision. It's really a vision of how Tesla could contribute to planet and the society. And then when you look at what it means in terms of business model, here in gray you have the traditional car manufacturers. So basically they design and produce cars and sell it. If you look at all the different things that Tesla would like to do in the target in 2 to 5 years, you have also energy for housing. You have this robotaxi networks that you were mentioning, so having cars that are available and that you can order, in fact, and they are autonomous, so they can transport you as taxis. So you could share your car, you could share your energy also with your house, with your neighbor, with etc. So a lot of things that are really designed with a platform view. In fact, you think about your product like a platform, and so the vision that you have of your company is that you build a platform like what you build when you build an Apple store or when you build a digital company, which is also different from what is done classically when in a manufacturing company. Integration. Integration is also something that struck me when I was there, because in the third industrial revolution, the tendency was more to focus on your core competencies. So, for instance, in car manufacturers are more assembly companies, so they assemble the car, but every element, like the seats, the wheels, etc., is done by subcontractors. In Tesla, it's a little bit different. There are a lot of things that are inside the company that are integrated, and the reason for that is speed. And Elon Musk says this quite often. Every time something is not quick enough, he will try to buy it or to build its own skill to be able to do it. So, for instance, Tesla bought Deepscale, which is a company to do autonomous driving, Maxwell, which is a company to make battery, Perbix is a company that makes machine for industrial sector. So it just, and he also decided to buy truck capacity, basically trucks to transport the cars, because he had a problem of delivery. So this mindset of integration is also something a little bit disruptive, because it's not the way manufacturing world is evolving since a few years. And he does also the same in SpaceX, by the way. You probably know it, but SpaceX has much less subcontractors than for instance, Ariane. And when I discuss with Ariane people here, one of their main constraints is their supply chain. They have more than 1,000 subcontractors, so it's very complicated to design a new launcher and to manufacture it. Whereas in SpaceX, you have really modules, and you have not so many subcontractors, which make it much quicker to design a new launcher. And the last dimension is tentacular traction. Tentacular traction is just basically how you use the outside of the company to improve the company or the product. It's also a mindset of the digital world. So you have a few examples here. For instance, regularly Tesla makes contests to hackers outside the company to improve the product. And if you manage, for instance, to hack a Model 3, then you just get the Model 3 as a gift. It's an example, but the way here is to use open source to have people outside the company improve the code. Another example is this idea of robotaxi. So robotaxi is really a network. So the vision is every owner of a Tesla in 2 to 3 to 5 years will be able to rent it to other people. So you go to work, you park your Tesla, and you just declare that your Tesla is available, and somebody else can pick it up, and the Tesla will drive and just pick the person and pick it somewhere, and then you earn money yourself as an owner because of your car. So it's a way of thinking which is really tentacular network thinking. And the last example that I put is this Cybertruck. In fact, in Tesla, there is quite no budget for advertising, and Tesla rely only on the buzz, basically on social media. This Cybertruck demonstration was, in a way, it was a fail, but in another way, it was really a way to make a big buzz. And at the time, I think there are 250K pre-order of this car. And just to have a comparison, the best-selling car in the US last year has been sold 900,000. So it's one-fourth of the selling of the best car in the US in 3 days. So just by doing the buzz, so just using the social media, the journalists, the press, etc., without any advertising, you manage to have a marketing campaign that you wouldn't have with the classical media. So this way of using your environment to improve your company is also quite disruptive. So I've talked a lot. I'm sorry about that. So we'll enter the next breakout. And I would like now to have your opinion on what is on that 7 dimension, what is specific to Tesla. So you couldn't try to replicate that on another company. And what is universal, so you probably would be able to replicate that on other companies. In fact, we won't have the time to do the end of the presentation, but interestingly, it's linked to what you said. One of the main difficulties is that Tesla is a greenfield, started from scratch in the Silicon Valley, in a place where digital already exists. How do you do to transform an existing company? So we won't elaborate because we don't have the time, but I would be more than happy to discuss with any of you who would like to discuss with that. Is what are the ingredients that you need to integrate in your transformation when you go from a brownfield, meaning from an existing big manufacturing company with 100,000 of people? How do you do that? So there are a few ingredients that make it possible. Maybe we will do another keynote to discuss that if you want, but we won't discuss that unfortunately right now. Now I would like to conclude because maybe it will be interesting to take a few questions. I thank you very much. It was very interesting to discuss with you. It's a never-ending topic, so we could discuss that all night, and I would be very happy to do that. I would like to thank François and Younes again for the invite, and I take maybe, I don't know if we have time to take a few questions.
Yes, sure. We're going to take a few questions, and, okay. And I'm seizing this opportunity because I didn't name him when I started the introduction. Thank you so much to Younes Benjeloun, who really organized this masterclass, and to my colleague Agnès Peignet, who's been organizing all the logistics for us tonight. So thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for the presentation. There is one thing that you mentioned briefly, but I think it's a strength of Tesla, and especially Elon Musk, is the story making and the marketing side. So you spoke about the glass that broke. Many people think it was on purpose, and because it led to, funny enough, they had 10 billion of pre-sales with 0 cent on marketing. So did you have the chance to analyze the marketing side of Tesla? That's one of the companies that spends actually the least in the planet to make a lot of profit and benefit.
As I said, I didn't study it on detail, so I wouldn't be able to really dig very deeply on that dimension. But as I mentioned it, I think it's a big strength of it, and it really relies on supporters and fans. Because when you look at social medias, even Twitter or LinkedIn or all the social medias, the owners of the Tesla owners are really usually fans of their cars. They really like it. They are more like car users. They are really like, I would say, like a kind of, I don't know the English for that, but tribu in French. And so they usually are the one who really are very much responsive on social media. And then after, it leads to other people who are outside. So a second circle of people who think Elon Musk is a funny guy, so they like it and they also respond to it. But I agree with you. I would like to have maybe the eye of an expert on that, because I'm not an expert on marketing, but I integrated it in the tentacle attraction, because to me it's really how you use the outside world to make advertising without spending €1. But I don't know the internal, really detailed resource of that.
Just to complete what you said, I was saying with him that when you buy a Tesla, it's like a diamond, no? You can buy a Ferrari, a Porsche, an Audi A-Suite, I don't know what, but a Tesla, please, my God, you are a high-level guy, no? And I don't know.
You're talking about status. Status, you mean?
I don't know how did he make. I don't understand. It's a kind of marketing. I don't know, but it's very special.
One of the clients in the US told me that when he first drove his Tesla, he had the same feeling as when he first had an iPhone after a Nokia. In fact, it was just a comparison he did. And so I tried a Tesla, and I must say I had the kind of same feeling. You need to adapt, but when you adapt, it's true that it's quite different. Another question?
Actually, I have a question for you, because you consult with lots of CEOs in the manufacturing industry. And how do they typically react when you tell them that Tesla and Elon Musk is the model for them?
Yeah, there's a kind of mixed reactions on that. Maybe the first reaction is a reaction of protecting yourself, which is normal, which is I would say 2 years ago it was different, but 2 years ago it was just, okay, he's a crazy guy, he's doing his car, but he will never manage to make mass production. So the Model 3 was really an important test because everybody was looking at it thinking that it would not manage to do it. Now that Model 3 is here, the volume is here, and commercially speaking, it's quite a success. There is a shift in the reactions, and people, and especially big car manufacturers, are starting to really trying to understand what makes Tesla different. So kind of curiosity. But what I see also in most of the companies that I help is a kind of feeling of people feel lost because they don't know, even if they agree that it could be a model, which is not always the case, but even if they agree with that, they don't really understand how to transform, as you said, how to go from where they are to this kind of company which is so disruptive. So it's, in a way, it's a kind of model which is inspiring, but in another way, it's also a model that can convey a little bit of fear because you see that you will never manage to go so far, in fact.
First, thank you for the presentation. It was really very interesting. I have a question for you, since it seems to be like you are really, convinced by Tesla model to be the model for the manufacturers you are like consulting or advising. I want to know from your experience with your other customers if you are proposing like the Tesla as a model for them. If yes, what is the reaction and what is the action plan you are putting in place to go further and to be like Tesla for them actually?
Yeah, it was maybe the page that we didn't go through. We can just elaborate a little bit on that. There are at least 3 things, and maybe the more important is the one on the top. Is in fact you cannot become a Tesla from a day to the next one. So first you have to identify your stakes. Every sector has different types of stakes. For instance, in food industry, the main stake nowadays is more traceability. How you make sure that people, what they eat, they know where it comes from. And they know that no children has been involved in the process and the animals has been respected, etc. If you are in the field of aeronautics, it's more safety, making sure that the supply chain make it possible that every part is controlled at every stage of the, etc., etc. In chemistry, it's more about how you use big data to improve the efficiency of your process with all the parameters, etc. So every sector has a specific stake, and you couldn't follow all the stakes at the same time. So you have to pick your stakes and to have a strategy on that stake, a vision. And then after that, you pick the technologies among all the technologies that we've seen at the start. You have to push a few of it and to get the right talents, because you cannot do everything at the same time when you're not Tesla and when you're not digital native. So you just start with one topic, and after that you enter this transformation method, which is start small, fail fast, and building on the energy of the teams in the field, and at the same time keeping your strategy to start and change the processes inside the company. But it's not an easy task at all.
Mr. Valentin, I would like to thank you for the presentation. It's very interesting.
Thank you.
And so it's my turn to ask you questions. Do you think that in the coming years, would the other automobile industry could compete with Tesla? As I can see, Tesla works now as a startup company. Think big, start small, scale fast.
Yeah.
Every startup does the same in IT.
Yeah.
And then you have shown that Tesla has not followed the automobile industry processes. It started as a very flat organization. So do you think in the next 10 years, would Audi, Nissan could compete with Tesla in the battery energy?
Yeah. It's a difficult question. At least what we see now is that the level of investment that, for instance, Volkswagen wants to invest is really at scale, because it's I think it's 20 billion euro that will be invested in the 5 years in Volkswagen. So some of the car manufacturers are really trying to see the shift, and even in France, there has been a report I think 3 days ago of the automotive kind of sector. That was about this shift. In fact, all the manufacturers start to transform their engine factories, because there is also a human side of it. the skills should change, the factories should change, employment will change. So all this change has to be done. So I think the car manufacturers now are on the way. The question is, will they manage to do something which is so different because they don't start from scratch? Now they are more continuing to transform existing cars. So you make Audi e-tron, you take an existing Audi and then you put an electric battery inside it. So it's a new car, but it's not really a new platform. The question is, will they be able to make new platforms dedicated for electric, connected, which is even more important than electric? So this shift, having its own network, etc., will take time. And it might come from other countries like China. If you go to China here, you have more than 20 car manufacturers that are pushing electricity, and electric car in China is going this way. And probably I would bet, if I should bet to a really big competitor, it would be more a Chinese one than a European one at the time. But I hope it won't be the case because I would like Europe to grow on that field.
We will take a last question.
We talked about the products and the client. You were in Tesla's and you talked with employees. What did they like about working for Tesla and what did they not like?
Yeah. What they like, I think it's quite almost every employee I interviewed is just working for Elon Musk. It's just quite amazing. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or if it's but I think there is this kind of personality which is very important. There is the vision that they quite all mention, especially the young one, working in a company that is part of the energetic transition. And if you look at Tesla, they are based in the Silicon Valley. So you have Apple, you have Google, you have Facebook, etc. And even in that geographical area, they receive 500,000 applications per year, 500,000. So meaning that they are very, very attractive on the place in Silicon Valley. Apart from that, there are also dark sides, of course. It's not everything is not good. And I didn't have the opportunity to meet somebody who was really like angry about Tesla. So maybe I was not. I didn't interview the right people, but I read a lot of studies on Tesla in Business Insider, and you see that the working conditions can be tough sometimes. And I think it's also a trend of the new economy, digital economy. For instance, in OPEO, we are a consulting firm, but we have also a startup studio. We launch startups, and I see the difference of culture. In startup, it's very fast. It's a little bit fun when you look at that like this, but it's very hard. Very, very hard environment. And I think you have this culture also in a company like Tesla. Like, if you follow, it's great. If you don't follow, you're out. That's probably one of the big stakes that for government also here in Europe, if you want to make a model a little bit different, to have the regulatory to make it possible to have tech, but in a human way. I don't know if I answer the question, but it's a tough question. Society question, I think.
So now we're going to have a networking cocktail. So you can keep asking your question to Michaël. And what I would like to announce is that we have an amazing event coming up on the 16th of January. So mark that on your agenda. It's going to be very participative, and it's going to be dedicated to leadership in the tech world, how women are driving the change. So it's going to be a great event with lots of amazing speakers. And now it's my time to say a big thank you to Michaël, because it's one of the best presentations I ever heard. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for your participation, all of you. And I was about to forget that I have a small gift for you. So that's French technology, very advanced, but also very experienced. So thank you very much.
That's my favorite one. Thank you.